Okay, hey guys, it's January 9th, 2019. This is Bob's life as it relates with alien context, and this is part 4.
So we just left off with Michael. Some strange things happened. Well, what's new? My life is strange. In the 1970s, getting into the later 1970s, I began experimenting more with the Uri Geller effect. It's called the Geller effect. And there were times I could get silverware to bend. One time I was eating at a restaurant with a friend of mine who was an engineer for the Piper Aircraft Association, or business, when they were still located in the city in Central Florida where I lived at the time. This guy was very interested in my psychic abilities and just different stuff that I could do, everything from healing to, I've been working a lot with healing with people and with other abilities as well. I loved healing, that was my favorite, still is. This one evening I'm sitting in this restaurant. I think it was like around 10 or 11 at night. And I had a fork that I was trying to do the Geller effect with. The prongs of the fork were here, handle here. Well, at one point the prongs bent down and backwards. Waitress comes up to take our order, and I said, "May I please buy this from the restaurant?" She looks over, "Why?" And I said, "Well, it's bent." She said, "Yeah, but why?" And I said, "Well, I did it with my mind. It's called the Geller effect. And I'm responsible for this, so I should pay for it." And she said, "Put it in your pocket. Just put it in your pocket. Take it. I don't want to see it. Get it out of my sight." And then she turns and walks away, and she's still saying, audibly clear, "My first night here. My first night here. Why did I have to get him?" My friend is trying to not laugh his head off at the time. There was another evening, same restaurant, where I was trying to bend a knife. And for all my efforts, bend, come on, bend, bend. For all my efforts, the only thing that was happening is there were little wavers happening in the metal of the blade, and then the tip of the knife disappeared like it had been lasered off. It didn't drop on the floor, it wasn't anywhere. It just wasn't anywhere. So one of two things happened. Either matter turned into energy without a bright light and a mushroom cloud, or matter got shared into a different dimension. That's what I think probably happened. At that point, the other knives on the table, the blades started bending upwards by themselves. Luckily, my engineer friend started laughing and said, what if this is happening on all the other tables in the restaurant?" That joke, the laughter, broke whatever was happening, and it stopped. The effect stopped. I continued working with healing work at that time. There was a woman who had cancer in her lungs and in her thyroid, and the prognosis was not good. She was a nurse. She lived near Opopka, Florida. My engineer friend took me to visit her, and when I do healing work, I can touch the person, I just normally don't. And I had my hands in the air above her shoulders. And I do a combination of silent prayer and meditation, in which I can see the person healthy, happy, joyful, up and around, dancing and having a great time. And I also feel the sensation of pure energy, pure love coming through me and them at the same time. Well, a week later, she called my friend and said, I don't know what Bob did, but the cancer in my thyroid's gone, the cancer in my lungs, only 20% left. And the doctor doesn't know how it happened. So I went back the next weekend and did another prayer session with her. And the cancer was gone after that. She and her husband, now this is like different levels of a healing. You know, we think of healing being physical, and it is, but there's other levels of healing too. She and her husband had gotten to the point where they stopped going out anywhere and stopped really having a life. And, well, when the cancer stopped and was gone, they went out dancing and having more of a life together and went to church together and everything. So multiple healing happened there, thank God. A woman who had had therapy for cancer, radiation, and chemo, another woman who lived in the town where I lived, or a city where I lived, came to our Tuesday night metaphysics group at this medical secretary's apartment that I've spoken of in a previous session on these. And she was coughing nonstop, and I was thinking, well, does she have the flu or something? What's going on? And she explained to the group what had happened, that this was a byproduct of the treatments that she'd had. And at one point she looked over at me and said, I know you do healing work, could you please help me? And I said, I'll be glad to. So I went over, and again I stood behind her and I put my hands probably 6 or 7 inches in the air above her shoulders. And I prayed and meditated. About 5 minutes, maybe 10 at most. I went back and sat down. 15 minutes later, she's only coughing once in a while. Another 15 minutes after that, she's not coughing at all. She too was a medical secretary at the Watson Clinic. The next day she went back to her doctor and said, take another x-ray. The doctor said, it won't do any good. There's not going to be any change. We just took an x-ray yesterday. She said, I don't care. Take another x-ray. The doctor did. Her lungs were totally clear. He kept hounding her to find out what happened, and she wouldn't tell him. She was afraid I'd get in trouble. I don't see how, because I was not practicing medicine. I never do any kind of prescribing, ever. I don't do a diagnosis. I don't, all I do is I meditate and pray, and even now it's still not illegal to pray and meditate in this country, so I don't see where I would have gotten any trouble. The medical secretary whose apartment where we met at that point said, okay, no more healing work here, because if you do get in trouble, I get in trouble for hosting it. Okay. Another part of my progress was with learning to influence the weather. And yes, we can do that. One afternoon I was at a fly-in picnic. I was taking flying lessons in the late 1970s, and it's a great feeling, wonderful feeling. But you could see across this, we were at the Winter Haven Airport, in fact, and you could see across the airfield rainstorm coming. We were just sat down to eat. So I said, hey God, give us 30 minutes, okay, so we can eat our food? And everybody's looking back and forth at each other and looking down at me like, what's with this wacko? Well, my engineer friend said, believe him, he has it in with the big guy up there. Sure enough, the rain stopped and held its place for 30 minutes to the minute. And then it let downpour right on us. We had finished our food. People there were checking their watches. They said, my God, it's 30 minutes to the minutes like he asked for. We went inside one of the hangars to get out of the rain. Anybody who knows anything about Florida, you know some of our rainstorms are really heavy downpours. Most of them were heavy downpours. Rains here in Chicago are nothing compared to what we used to get there. And then there's black skies, sideways rain, heavy thunder and lightning non-stop, and of course the hangar that we were in made it like an echo chamber, and I got a headache from it. I went, leaned in the doorway looking at the weather. One of the pilots, an older guy, comes up behind me and says, "Hey Sonny, what do you think of our Florida thunderstorms?" Well, I'm a Floridian. Of course people didn't think I was because I didn't have an accent. I turned around to him and I said, "I hate it. I wish it would stop now." And it did. Like if you turned off a switch. I don't mean the rain slackened up. I mean the rain stopped. Thunder and lightning stopped. And at that point, that older pilot starts backing away from me with a nervous laugh. Well, I looked over at my engineer friend and he's looking like that at me. He comes over, "What did you do?" "Oh, I was just joking, but I really didn't like all the heavy thunder and lightning. It was giving me a bad headache in here." "Set it back." I said, "No, don't want to." "Set it back. You don't know what changes you've made somewhere else by doing this." So finally I said, all right. I said, "Just leave me alone." So I walked around for a little bit and did a silent prayer. "Okay, God, let it be back the way it was." Instantly, downpour, thunder and lightning, sideways rain, echo chamber, thunder and lightning. There was another incident another time, this was years later, where some friends of mine came from Haines City, Florida, and they had made this tall copper rod wrapped in leather with a crystal on the top of it. And they asked me to try it out to see if I could do anything with it. We were at a restaurant on South Florida Avenue, and in fact it was Denny's, and we had eaten and were standing out near one of their cars. They handed me this 6-foot tall rod. Off to the north of town there were thunderheads. I jokingly lifted the rod and said, "Okay, like with Moses, part the water." I said, "Well, part the clouds." And suddenly those clouds weren't there anymore. They were on the other side of town. Same clouds. How do you move tons of water vapor miles and miles in like that? Disappeared from north side of town, reappeared south side. At that point, they came and took the rod out of my hands, and they said, "Well, we think maybe that's enough of that for now." But you see, we can influence the weather. Anyone can do it. It's child's play. But don't be a child when you're doing it. Don't be childish. Remember, what you do has effects on other people and can hurt people and animals. These are the kind of things I was doing in the late 70s and early 80s. I was progressing, finding out that there were no limits. I started taking a class at that time called A Course in Miracles, which I would advise for anyone who wants to be involved with spiritual growth. I think it's about the best piece of literature we have on the planet that's published at this time. It's gentle, takes about a year to go through it properly. I wasn't having much contact with Michael during that time, and I wasn't missing it, in all honesty. Don't get me wrong, I respect him and I love him. But I've learned not to think of myself as having to be dependent on him. And I like it that way. One evening at a Unity meeting, a Wednesday night church meeting, this woman came in. She was being held under her arms by her relatives. She'd had knee surgery. Both knees were wrapped in figure-8 bandages and swollen. She couldn't walk hardly at all. She was in a lot of pain, tremendous amount of pain. After the service was over, one of her relatives came over to me and said, "Could you please help our aunt?" And I said, "Sure, I'll be glad to." I went over and turned a chair around. I got her permission first. You don't do healing to people, you do it with them. Very important. Healing is always shared. In whatever form, it's always a shared relationship. I put my hands in the air about 6 inches outside of her knees and began meditating and praying and thinking of her feeling totally healthy and having a great time. All of a sudden, both ace bandages, figure-8 bandages that were wrapped around her knees, loosened and fell to the floor. Her knees weren't swollen, they were normal size. She got up, walked around, and even danced around on her own without any pain. Again, I thank God. But you see, God's not somebody up there only. God is the people who are sharing the healing. Very important. So, I tried, like my mom advised me back when I was 11 and 14, whatever you do, don't forget who your source is. And I've never forgotten. In 1982, I had been teaching classes in adult basic education for adult mentally handicapped. And I loved it. It was one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done in my life. During a lunch period, which was a free period for me, I got this wonderful feeling. It wasn't Michael. I mean, Michael's wonderful feeling too, but this was the source of everything. This was God. And this feeling asking me, would you be willing to pick up a legal size pad and a pen? And would you let me write? I could have said no and it would have been perfectly fine. But I thought, why not? This feels good. So, here I'm holding a legal pad. Now, I advise very strongly against automatic writing. I mean that, I'm not kidding. It can really have some bad results. But in this case, writing started in cursive writing. I don't write cursive, I write print. Nobody can read my cursive. I can't either. That's how bad it is. This was beautiful, like somebody old style writing who owned a store or something. And while it was going on writing, I would be thinking, well, the next sentence should be this, this, and this. Only while I'm thinking this, this, and this, it's writing a whole different sentence by itself. I let this happen about 3 different times and quit. The reason for that is this. When the sessions would start, it felt like I was Clark Kent stepping into the phone booth and taking off Clark Kent and then flying through the air as Superman. It felt great. When the sessions would end and this wonderful feeling would pull back, it was back to Clark Kent again. And that was okay. But it just didn't feel the same as when I was Superman and it was riding through me. And then the next one of these, we'll take it a little further. What was that?